All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's Digital Service Network Summer Event Series titled Leveraging Leadership to Improve Human-Centered Service Delivery, featuring Luke Charde, Jessica Houle, and Gabe Paley from the state of New York. I'm Kirsten Wyatt from the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's discussion. The Digital Service Network empowers governments to use human-centered strategies to deliver digital services that meet the needs and expectations of people who use them. We are supported by the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University and U.S. Digital Response. Sharing stories and experiences about government digital services is a cornerstone of the DSN, and today's event will reflect that. Today, we'll learn from our speakers about New York's human-centered design journey, some lessons learned along the way, and how they've leveraged strong relationships to drive this work. This is part of our summer event series that is focused on the important relationships that make government digital transformation possible. We'll first hear from Luke, Jessica, and Gabe with some background information about their work and their organization. And then we'll have a structured conversation with our guests, leaving time at the end for our attendees to ask questions too. This event is free, and a recording and recap will be available online after today's event. And if you haven't yet joined our mailing list, we hope you'll take a minute to sign up for the Digital Service Network. The DSN is here to be responsive to your needs, and will develop more webinars, articles, research, toolkits, and more based on what you're looking for to advance your work in your organizations. If you have questions while the team is presenting, please use the chat to ask questions, and I'll moderate them as they come in or toward the end. And as you can see, we'll also be active in the chat, sharing links and information from our speakers today. And so with that, it's my great pleasure to hand it over to Luke, Jessica, and Gabe.
Hi, thanks so much. I will kick it off. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here with all of you. Thanks so much for having us. My name is Gabe Paley. I am the Assistant Secretary for Technology in the Office of Governor Kathy Hochul in New York, and I'll pass it to Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Houle. I'm the Digital Service Director at the Office of General Services in New York. And Luke?
Luke Charde. I work in the Office of IT Services, and I'm the Director of Digital Experience there.
Okay, so we're going to give a quick overview of what is this org chart and what are these teams, how do they relate to each other. I'll start. So the executive chamber is where I say that's the name for the governor's office in New York. Just some of the key kind of the roles that I'll talk about a little bit later. Obviously, Governor Hochul. Within that office, we have the state operations team, which is where I sit. That team is run by Catherine Garcia, who's our director of state operations. And the function of that team, the state operations team, is to oversee the executive agencies of the state. There are about 100 of them. In my role in technology, I work really closely on all things tech. And so then I'll pass it to Luke to talk about ITS, our Information Technology Services Office.
Sure. ITS was formed about a decade ago. New York State is a unified technology state where all the tech workers from the executive agencies are brought together into one organization. We've been on a little over a decade journey in that, and excited to talk to you about what that looks like from inside a tech organization. My team, I have a human-centered design team in ITS, and we focus on some of the bullets you see up in the top. It's kind of like a Venn diagram, though, because it's not like certain things get done by my team, certain things get done by Jess's team. Delivering what needs to be done is the goal, and sometimes we share some skills and bring the right team together for whatever project it is. And Jess, to you.
Yep. And so my team's within the Office of General Services. So they provide beyond just digital, a lot of services to state agencies. Just kind of wanted to highlight in this visual that, as Gabe noted, there's over 100 agencies, but both of the agencies that Luke and I sit within are not necessarily dealing with like public facing. We're sort of supporting the agencies in all of their work. And as Luke noted, we have some distinct skill sets that we have for each team, but a lot of the work that we do is collaborative, and we're working together with the agencies and the executive chamber.
So I'm going to kind of tell you a story it's going to be much more interesting than org charts. And I want to take you in my time machine. And we're going to use the Wayback Machine today. And I want to take you back 15 years. 15 years ago, Jessica and I actually were at a state agency. We were at the New York State Department of Labor. And we were not operating at statewide level. We were operating at Department of Labor. So that was 2009. And Jess came from television. I came from education. I had already been, teaching in junior high for 10 years. And I was ready to move into government. And we both found ourselves there, like starting within a month of each other. But I want to take you even further back than that. Let's go to 1996. This is the New York State Department of Labor's entrance onto the World Wide Web. Look at this thing of beauty. It was really just a billboard. You put out some press releases or, get some information out there. And this was what it looked like in 1996. And this is a microcosm of all the different, what was happening across the whole state back in the mid-90s. I was, in my dorm room, I was jacking into the phone lines in the ceiling and going onto the internet, but it looks like Department of Labor was doing some productive stuff. And let's look at the evolution. Let's jump from 1996. 2001, look at this. We got images, we got rounded corners, but essentially it's the same thing, right? It's a kind of a billboard. But what started happening right after 2001 is the prospect of moving these paper forms onto online transactions started happening. And as we move toward 2005, you can see maybe a little bit of information architecture is being considered, but really not a lot of investment. The main thing happening was just getting things online. And we started seeing, the goal of different state agencies was how many services can we bring online? And that was kind of the metric. The challenge was user behavior didn't always follow. There was confusion and the thought that, this large group of people will shift from paper or phone onto online didn't quite happen the way people had wanted it to happen. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. But there wasn't really, UX as a discipline was just emerging. And look at 2008. This is the site that Jessica found her first day walking into the Public Information Office in Department of Labor. I was in the IT side. This was before ITS was even created. I was in the technology group at Department of Labor. And, we both started asking, how might we do things better than this? Because, look at this thing. It's we got rid of all the photos. Simplicity, some people wanted to get simple, and that was a way of optimizing, but we knew we could do better. So what we started to do, and this happens across all these different state agencies. This was grassroots. This was, two people that thought we can do better than this. We started really approaching it from, whatever UX practices we could figure out at the time. And of course, we got training and got better at it over time. But, just breaking into user task analysis and information architecture. And rather than just having the graphic designer make a mock-up of the new site, which is how every previous site had been done, we started really digging a little bit deeper. And it went even deeper than the homepage. I'll show you in 2009, we launched a new site. I'm kind of embarrassed that we lost the battle of removing the carousel. The executives wanted their carousel, of course, but we lost that one. But you can start centricity emerging. And we didn't just stop with the homepage. We started looking at, okay, these tasks that connect through to these online services, how might we extend the design system, the interactive consistency across all those things? And when this was about the time that ITS was formed, and Jessica got recruited to go work in the governor's office and try to do some of these same things at a state level. And the challenge of scale is real. ITS was formed, and I jumped into seeing how we might scale out user-centric design and human-centered practices within a 4,000 tech organization that had absolutely no dedicated HCD people at the time. Think of that ratio. But I'm going to turn over to Jessica. Tell us where it went from there.
Thanks, Luke. So as Luke mentioned, we both sort of, after we did this grassroots effort at DOL, got plucked to move to the larger organizations to start thinking about this statewide. And so I initially went to the governor's office, and the idea was to start tackling this ecosystem. We both sort of love this visual because it sort of represents you know, beyond websites, we're talking about hundreds of websites, thousands of applications. And then there's new things we find every single day. And so, you know, first starting at the chamber, started to tackle these things. But, you know, with all of the press announcements happening every day, we were spinning up new websites for just about every initiative. And the amount of tech debt we were incurring, it was, you know, monumental. Then in 2013, the governor hired its first ever chief digital officer, Jessica Houle. This hire at the executive level was really sort of the major shift in our work and, you know, how agencies perceived everything moving forward. Sort of signaled from the top the importance of this work and how we all needed to sort of change our ways of thinking. Pulled this not quote, but a statement that we use in most of the presentations we gave when Rachel first started. We take everything that we do and redesign it with the end user at the center so that the typical New Yorker can quickly, easily, and painlessly get what they need. Not really earth-shattering sentence, but putting it on a slide and going from agency to agency to sort of deliver this message was pretty powerful because it kind of gave everyone pause to stop and think of like, these are the people we're serving. We're trying to make this as easy as possible and get them the services that they need so they can, you know, move on with their day. So it started with ny.gov, the work. So this is a quick little before and after. The before had not been redesigned since 1999, as you can probably tell. But beyond bringing it to like a modern look and feel, this was really the first setting the standard of putting the users first. So what we did was sit down with every single agency, get from them who are the users and the New Yorkers that you're serving, what are the top services they're coming for, how do they complete those services? Is it online? Are there forms? Are they still mailing things in? And from there, what we did was we called them navigator pages, but really what they were sort of step-by-step instructions on how to complete these services. So what is it? Here's the eligibility. How do you do it? So before you get to that either paper form or online application, make sure you have your license. You're going to need your tax ID number. You know, this was the feedback we got from agencies that so many of the calls or conversations they had to have was because people didn't have the right information or didn't know what they need. So when we launched ny.gov, we started with 65 services. And it really, beyond helping New Yorkers, it also sort of got the agencies excited about this work and sort of saw that this is the direction in which we're moving. And then the proof was in the work. Within a year, the traffic to the site had more than doubled. We had over 5 million visitors to the site. And the agencies were seeing the response in their transactions and sort of starting to itch to want to make the improvements on their own agency websites, which was great. From there, it sort of shifted into focusing on the culture. So we started off with a statewide kickoff conference, and that was led by Rachel and the ITS CIO at the time, again, trying to set the stage from having the executive sponsorship to show that this was important, but then really left it up to my team, Luke's team, and a few others to kind of lay the groundwork on how we can all work together to kind of start to do this work. From there, our teams started to quickly grow. We went from 2 to 10 to nearly 15. So we were able to do more work. We set up digital roundtables. We held like bi-monthly sessions, you know, bringing all the champions from the agencies together, giving them, you know, bringing in speakers or walking them through successful projects to learn things about like plain language, accessibility, UX, how do you develop a content strategy, like starting to set goals and read your data. And the one thing that we heard over and over from agencies were, as we were finding these champions, that they were so grateful to have a place to come together and start to build this community, because it can be so isolating in an agency when you're trying to do this work or solve a problem and only have maybe one other person, if you're lucky, to sort of talk through that. But as we started building this community, it gave a place for people to kind of share ideas, ask questions, talk through experiences. And it really started, that's when we saw the big shift in the culture there. And then beyond the culture work, we started expanding the work. With the growth of our team, we were able to develop what we called SWAT teams. And so we went into the individual agencies for some 6, 7, 8 months and really sat side by side with them and tried to do this work, because it was beyond, you know, the facelift, sort of like tying back to what Luke said at the beginning. We can all like have a graphic designer make a pretty looking website or application, but that doesn't really move the needle on what we're trying to do. And the work that goes into before the redesign is difficult, and oftentimes where people, you know, try to cut corners or skip steps. So we sat down with the agencies, walk through, you know, discovery processes, understanding who their users are, figuring out the journeys of what they're trying to take, what are the top things they're trying to achieve, where are the roadblocks and the falling off points right now. Meet with every single program area within the agency. We'd learn things like there was an old phone number on a website that was getting 50 phone calls about one broken link. So if you just changed that one small process, you're improving the workflow for like a whole program within the agency. We did information architecture, and then really help them write the content, because that's the other thing. It's very difficult for people within the agencies, especially the programs themselves. They're experts in the work, but not necessarily how to put it on a website. So like, let's set them up with the tools, you know, to organize that and give them what they need. And, you know, with this work, we were able to redesign over 36 websites. During this time, Rachel departed, so that top executive that sort of had started the spearheading of this work was gone, and the role actually wasn't filled for quite some time, but the relationships that we had built sort of carried the continuity of the work and really even helped it grow, which was kind of incredible to see. And then 2020 came, and the world was turned upside down with COVID. And as you can imagine, ours was too. You know, all the momentum we had been building was sort of came to a big halt. And so while we could no longer do these, you know, in-person sessions and collaborating, all this work that we had been talking about and, you know, different ways of thinking was put into practice because it had to be. New York was, you know, at the front lines of COVID response, while the world was still trying to figure out what this was. We were trying to stand up, you know, mobile hospitals, testing sites, informing people just like what COVID even was, symptoms, what to look for, how you could be safe, could I go see a family member? And so right away, we all had to kind of huddle together and figure out, how do we get this information out to people and do it in an urgent way, because we needed to. And it was a perfect example because we were all, you know, had family, friends, relatives that were, you know, had COVID or knew someone that had COVID. You could put yourself in the place of, what would I need to do? Or what does my mother need to do? Or my grandmother that's in a nursing home, what information does she need? And it was a really momentous time of all this work was like really immediately put into practice. And data was driving every decision. We were real-time tracking as a press conference or a new regulation was put out either by the federal government or state government, you could sort of track where people were looking for, the trends they were searching for, and we knew that we needed to answer those things. And so these champions that we had sort of been building this culture with the agency really rose to the top in the leadership because they were ready and prepared to kind of deal with this rapid response. Luke, I'll turn it over to you for the specific example.
Yeah, and the constraints of COVID were pretty amazing because no longer were we talking about timelines. The timeline came to us, and what we needed to do came to us, and everybody rallied. And so, for instance, the when it came time for the states to deliver the vaccine at their mass vaccination sites, we did not have time to build a new system. So the constraint was we are going to use this existing system called, oh my, the name slips me, but it was actually the system used for rabies clinics and other types of small scale vaccinations that would happen across the state. But when, it's a poor user experience, didn't scale to mobile, it wouldn't even scale to the load that we needed. Because remember when everybody was trying to register for vaccinations, it was millions of people. It was a Ticketmaster problem. It was everybody wanted these limited things. And what we had to do is really look at the work that Jess was doing. Look at the, she was leading the information design on people coming through the initial parts of the funnel. And we had to look at the journey and, is someone eligible? The first people through were the people with pre-existing conditions and the elderly. We had to design a registration system that I kind of put my own 70-year-old father as the persona. Can my father register for his vaccine on his own with one hand on his phone? And what we did is we had to really analyze the journey. We had to look at the moments that matter, and that critical point where people are refreshing the browser, trying to see, is there vaccine available? Some people were opening up multiple computers, phones, just trying to get that slot. As soon as they got that slot, locking in their time, taking a lot of the patterns from Ticketmaster and other, booking systems, and then breaking up the screens. So often people think when we optimize, we reduce the number of screens. We actually took that desktop application, we tripled the number of screens, and we made it very conscious clicks going from one screen to another, eliminating screens if we could based on previous answers. And we were able to really, let me jump to here. We were able to really design a system that it was elegant, and a lot of these patterns that we arrived at, these application design patterns, are going into our new New York State design system. We want to scale these out. So tremendous work that was done during that time. And we also put it in front of people. Getting it, watching. I was able to watch my 70-year-old father register for his vaccination with one hand on his phone. But we knew that with testing with real people that it did work, and just that registration system was a success. And I would just encourage everyone, embrace the constraints that come to us. We don't want another COVID, but they say that the artist, the constraints of the medium are what makes a great piece of art. And the constraints of any situation or project, if we embrace them and do what we can from a human-centered or UX perspective, that will be enough. And we'll actually blaze new trails in that manner. And outcome of that was really, we had something, we had a reference application at that point that we could scale. And all we did is we took the front end, we redesigned the front end, we moved it from the data center to the cloud. We made it massively scalable, and it set a pattern for modular improvement also. So many of our government projects, we attempt to do too much. We don't limit the scope, when if we took it step by step in an agile way and just improved incrementally, we can really, treating our government systems more as products than projects, we can really make improvements. So coming out of COVID, just the constraints and the effort and the unification, the leveraging of relationships, like Jess was saying, really worked out well. And brought us, we're working within the ecosystem. And, the funny thing is, you can't solve an entire ecosystem. You just can't. It's too complex. But what we can do is through user journeys and figuring out what can we change, how might we take on just a piece at a time, we can trace paths of success through this complexity. And then over time, we're 25 years into this whole internet thing. This didn't get created overnight, but slowly we can improve it. And just getting things online was the first generation of the internet. Now we're optimizing things, we're improving things, and that's just it's an exciting place to be. Technology is not going to change any slower. But meanwhile, Gabe was doing some interesting things during COVID himself. And Gabe, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so to segue over to the current Hochul administration's efforts and some of my personal background, despite all this amazing work that Luke's team and Jessica's team were doing and that people of New York State were doing, it was still very frustrating as a person in New York City to try to get a vaccine appointment. So despite once you were able to actually find an appointment, the flow was much more seamless than it had been before they got involved. Finding an appointment itself was still a really big challenge. And part of the reason was that they were still only focused on the state government website. But if you lived in New York City like I did at the time, I'm a lifelong New Yorker, you also had a site from New York City government, and you also had pharmacies with their own websites. And it became very painful to try to find an appointment. And so I was working, I spent a lot of my career in the tech industry, working in data analytics roles. And I joined a group of volunteers back in 2021. We built our own website that all it did was just scrape appointments from all of the places where you could get an appointment to put it in one place. And it turned out that that was a part of the journey that had been missing. And so this site ended up getting quite a lot of traction and ultimately prompted, I think, an interesting set of conversations about government experience and really kind of prompted me to think a lot more about digital services in government and also like wondering why was it that it wasn't anyone's individual responsibility to look at a person in New York City's experience all the way through the whole journey across all these different websites and make it improved. And so that kind of set me down a rabbit hole, which led me into the Hochul administration in this role that I find myself in now, where my focus is really on trying to elevate the team of the work of this team and build up the work that we're doing in digital services. And I was really fortunate to find some really like-minded folks, including the governor herself, who earlier in her career had been a county clerk in Erie County, New York, had overseen the DMV, had overseen the services that the county was providing, and deeply understood the importance of delivering services to people in their relationship with the government itself and with their political leaders. So we had immediate alignment from the governor herself and vision from the governor. And also I mentioned Catherine Garcia, who oversees the state government as the director of state operations. Also had come from the city agency, the sanitation department, where she was really close to the ground level, delivering services to people and understood the importance of this. So for us, it was not a question of, is this important work that we want to be elevating and continuing, but it was really a question of how we wanted to do it. And I will say that, admittedly, when I joined, I learned a little bit about the U.S. Digital Service. There was a temptation to say, let's try to mimic the model that's been done elsewhere. Let's do these 2 to 4 year fellowships. Maybe, let's think about how these teams are structured. But upon kind of listening and learning and really getting to know Luke and Jessica, it became really clear that's not what we needed to do. Like, these teams were doing the work. They had been on the ground for years doing this incredible work. Our role was to try to lift them up and continue to invest in them and help them grow and empower them, ensure that they had a seat at the table and ensure that they were getting involved early on and connect them to more of the kind of policy priorities of the governor's office. So one of the ways that we really moved that forward was through what you see here, the state of the state. That's the annual process by which the governor's office kind of sets policy, identifies the priorities of the governor of the government. And we had a chapter in that state of the state policy book, which I think will be shared around, about customer experience, which is the term that we, of course, has been widely utilized at the federal level, where we came up with an agenda around specific sets of initiatives to improve processing times, to really do this work of improving services, digital and otherwise. And part of that was also investing and growing the teams, Luke's and Jessica's teams, and making sure that they had the room and money to grow. So I'm now going to jump to a slide that I borrowed from Joshua Gee, who I see is actually on this call. Joshua was responsible a number of years ago for moving every form in Boston city government online. And I thought he wrote a great blog post about it, which I linked to here. But this screenshot stuck with me as we were thinking about how to structure this work in New York State, which was, you can digitize forms, but that doesn't necessarily improve the experience of filling out a form. And here I'm using form as kind of a stand-in for government interactions. But below this iceberg, right, the iceberg of the tip of the iceberg is a form. Below the iceberg are all these different pieces that add up to experience. And technology is only one piece of that experience. And one of the things that I was observing, a gap, as I kind of got to know Luke and Jessica and watch their teams work, was that sometimes an agency might throw a form over a wall or a process over a wall and say, just digitize this, that will address the experience issues. And of course, I think many of us know that there's so much more that goes into that. And it became really clear that we needed a champion to relay the message and kind of drive home the point that everyone owns experience. The agencies have to be the owners of experience. It can't just fall in the role of a digital service team. And I'm sure there's something that some folks on this call can relate to, that sometimes you find yourself in a debate and you say, we actually really urge you to change the language on this form, but maybe you're told that's not the role of the technologist. That's really the role of the policy folks. So if you jump to the next slide, that kind of gave birth to this role that we now have in the governor's office, the chief customer experience officer. We've appointed Tanya Webster, who's really done a spectacular job. And just to speak a little bit to the thinking behind this role, it sits in the governor's office. It was really important to us that this not only be seen as a tech thing. This is a role that reports directly to the director of state operations. It's at a level equivalent to the various deputy secretaries who oversee the agency portfolios. And the job, I've identified a couple of the descriptions here. The job description is going to be circulated in the chat, but it really is about driving forward this message of prioritizing outcomes and service delivery improvements and helping agency leaders, being at the table with commissioners and agency leaders to set goals and targets around customer experience, acknowledging that teams like Luke and Jessica can really help with this work, but it has to be owned by the agencies. They're the ones who own the experience. And kind of working through process gaps, helping them identify issues with potentially regulations as well. There's a role for lawmakers and policymakers to play as well in improving experience. And of course, at any given moment in time, there's any number of technical initiatives happening. We wanted to ensure that when we're doing these quote unquote modernizations, or we're trying to get off the mainframe, as many states and governments are doing, we're aligned with our customer experience priorities. We should be taking on those initiatives to drive outcomes for users, not for the sake of modernizing it for itself. And so we have a lot of initiatives going on across all these different areas. We're going to speak to a couple of case studies of ways that we're doing this now. And really the relationship has been part of our role we see as in the governor's office is really kind of opening up the conversations and convening folks in the way that they were speaking about earlier about the power of the relationships and the community building. We really see that as our role in the governor's office now, is to continue to build those communities around New York State and connect these teams that are doing the work on the ground with the kind of priority policies in the areas of the government that could really benefit from them, that are serving large numbers of people, that may be goals of the governor herself. With that, we'll speak to a couple of those examples now.
So have you ever gotten a letter from the tax department and it sits on your table and you're afraid to open it? Well, many New Yorkers get that letter, and the New York State Tax Department has to tell them, you're missing something. We need something from you. And they have a time frame to respond. And the tax department set a strategic goal to improve response rates and also to shift from paper responses, because think of the amount of work that goes into receiving paper, scanning it in, getting into document management, things like that. And we've seen this pattern, mobile document capture, be very successful across New York State in different situations, and even nationally, internationally. And so a technology solution was developed to have a QR code on this piece of paper that once you open that letter, you can see it. And then look at this. You can go from a 5-minute completion time to a 1-minute completion time, removing the login, because if we already know who you are and we can give you a custom QR code, we can route your document submission and attach it right to your case. A lot of people were just getting confused with the login and then all the wayfinding getting to where they needed to go. It sounded great. And so what my team and Jess's team assisted with was, let's do some usability testing. Let's see how the actual humans respond to this. And so what we did is, isn't it interesting that you only need to test with 5 to 7 people to find 90% of the issues with something. And we set up a table in the concourse. This is the underground area underneath that big egg-shaped building in Albany. And we gave out free water bottles to participants, and we spent the day testing. And this is something, we do a lot of testing with usertesting.com and virtual testing. This type of experience is something you have to do in person. So what we did is we gave people an envelope and said, pretend like this just arrived in your mailbox, open it up and see what you need to do. And we tried to replicate the experience. And we definitely learned some things. We learned that people were very good at taking pictures and finding them in their camera roll. Like areas we thought they would stumble, they didn't. But they really struggled with the QR code. with people knew what it was, but some of them opened different apps, and it wasn't as straightforward. And the new solution that was actually deployed, and the digital response rate went down. Imagine that at first. But then through the usability testing, we were able to see how might we improve the paper that went in the envelope to the people? How might we improve the instructions to kind of onboard people into the digital experience? And the usability testing really showed that people struggled with understanding how easy it was. You can't just put a QR code out there. Sometimes you have to give kind of that job aid, or that little insert that says, this is easy, you can do this. Because that moment they make the decision, am I going to attempt to do it digitally, or am I going to just use the very easy self-addressed envelope? That's the moment that you need to affect. And once the learnings from the usability testing were included, plain language insert that just really got people over that decision point of, do I do digital or do I do paper? It saw an increase from 53% digital channel response rate to 78%. And that's huge, because small percentages of large numbers are also large numbers. And the amount of time that was saved, if you multiply the response rate, digital response rate, by that 5 minute to 1 minute reduction in just burden for people, they got a better experience. The tax department is getting moving to digital. That's business efficiency. So a real win. And I'd encourage everybody to think about human-centered design is great, and when the outcome is just an experience. But if we can help move the needle on business value also at the same time, that will get investment. It shouldn't be, they're not exclusive. We can improve the experience and hit the business goals, and that's really where we can rally people around as well. So back to you, Gabe.
One more, and then we'll wrap up. But Jessica's going to speak a little bit more about some of the work we're doing with Tanya's team. Oh, you're on mute, Jess.
Sorry. So as Gabe noted, with Tanya coming on board, we're really focused on the journey and improving the overall experience for New Yorkers. And so with a lot of the work we've done, the one piece that consistent way we haven't gotten feedback from New Yorkers, we didn't really have a mechanism to do that. So one of the things that we've been working on and piloting first on ny.gov and the governor's website is adding a feedback form and place at the bottom of our pages for people to share their experiences with us. All of our teams are well aware of the major pain points people face, and there's, large modernizations happening across a variety of agencies, but we all felt like there's like low-hanging fruit fixes that could be done. And, this is a mechanism to kind of maybe pull some of those out. And we launched it about a year ago, and we've collected a few thousand responses, and there were some helpful feedback options that we've gotten from people. One around professional licenses, we got a lot of complaints about that, and it turns out we had some dead links in some deep within our systems, and just changing those and updating some phone numbers saw a significant drop in the feedback we were getting. Another instance was during COVID, there were a number of offices that changed around renewing your birth certificate, and that information hadn't been updated. So made those fixes, and all of that feedback went away. So all to say that it doesn't always have to be a huge, giant project. There's little, small, incremental things we can do that can really make a big impact on the overall experience. And we've used all of this information to kind of prepare a larger pilot we're working on and expect to be announcing in the next couple of months.
Great, thanks, Jess. So we looked back over the past decade and tried to think about how might we summarize this in a slide, and this is our attempt. The winding path of leading, and when we say leadership, if you're the only one doing the right thing, you're leading. And as you do the right thing, you'll gather more people around you and get more momentum. And that executive sponsorship, as much as we would like that all the time right now with Gabe and with Governor Hochul, we have very strong executive sponsorship. But we know with the economy, there are lean years. There are years of plenty. There's going to be times that we can grow the team. There's going to be times that we have to, get efficient with what we have. And during the lean times, it's really the relationships. It doesn't cost money to build relationships. It doesn't cost money to build the teams and the people that you already have. And one thing that I've really invested in is just bringing students in, like finding students. We have quite a few universities in our area, and getting student assistants and really growing them. Half my team started out as a student assistant. We find like high capacity, um, you know, students that have a heart for public service. One of my regrets over the years is I hired some very talented people that as soon as they could get more money for their talent, they were on their way, and good for them. But when we find people with a heart for public service, they stick around and they get invested in it, and they'll be with us for the long haul. So, Jess and Gabe, I'd be curious as to how this diagram resonates with you too.
I'm going to pass it back to our moderators because I think we went a little bit over time, and I want to make sure we have time for questions.
Okay.
So, thanks, guys.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Luke, for teeing up our two questions that we're asking at every event during this webinar series, talking about relationships. So I'm going to ask those first, but for all of our attendees, we've seen some great questions coming in the chat, and so we will get to those. But if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. But we'll get started thinking about these relationships that are so essential for digital transformation. So I'd love to hear from you about why that relationship between digital innovation and having that executive sponsorship or having leaders behind you is so important in that overall goal of improving service delivery.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on a little bit here, but one of the things I think we want to emphasize is really the power of the leadership as a convener, as a means of connecting people, as a means of kind of driving focus, of driving investment. I think has really been, over the years, hopefully you've seen like one of the more impactful things that leadership can do. But I'll pass to Luke and Jess if there's anything you want to add.
I concur.
Yeah.
All right, and for other teams that are on this call that are looking to build stronger relationships between their digital service efforts and leadership at whatever level of government they may be in, any advice or recommendations that you've learned over the years in increasing that level of executive sponsorship and then continuing to build relationships that have a lot of trust behind them?
I think a couple things. I just talking about it, presenting information, and I think one of the strong things about a lot of the work we do is that whether it's usability testing or all the data we're collecting, there are like real numbers behind those things, and traditionally those are really telling to executives. So just organizing those things in a way to like bring them to the table. I think those are hard things to turn away from and can be really impactful to kind of champion some work.
I'd say storytelling. I mean, the more we can package up a success into a story that frames the need at the beginning. Here's what we did. Here's how it improved things. Not storytelling as cookie cutters, but storytelling as here's what's possible. Here's a different way of doing things. And that resonates with the hearts of people. And that's how, we go the right direction many times.
I would really just echo that. And I think it's something that Luke and Jessica do and have done over the last couple of years extremely well. That's been really impactful to our ability to kind of, get this agenda, through in the governor's office, as well as just the the success that they've had at storytelling, at building a case, at helping me and my peers kind of circulate these ideas. It's so much of it comes down to even just things like slide decks, which tends to be how stories get told in government sometimes. And I found their storytelling to be really effective, and it's really helped me and kind of doing what I need to do. So.
And as a follow-up to that, a great question here from Joshua. I'd be interested to hear how you communicate that business impact and value back to the larger org versus just a case-by-case basis. So maybe expand a little more on how storytelling is a part of that, but some of the other ways that you're showing impact and value.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we think about New York State, there are 50 different official state agencies. And within those state agencies, there's all these different program areas. The meaning of the business impact is most understandable by the group that it affects. So I think the most important thing is to understand the cycles of these projects and their funding and when leverage can be had. And that took me a long time to learn. I mean, when I came into work for government, I was just pointing out, like, here's all the things that are wrong, and I'm so smart, and I can help you fix it. A little bit, I was young and impetuous, still impetuous, but old now. But understanding where we can advocate for funding and a different approach. It doesn't always work. If we can find that lever of a business need that we know with some investment in human-centered design or a different approach that we can move the needle, and getting exposure to those. So within ITS, it's a connection to our project and portfolio office. And as early as possible, being able to see the things that agencies are proposing. The executives at our agency got their business problems all the time. And if we can get a window into that, we can bring stories to them, we can bring approaches, and really help them see where things might be moved. Trying to move the needle just by let's improve everything for everybody. I haven't seen too much success in that manner, as admirable as that goal might be.
For me, I think the case-by-case basis and the individual agencies and programs that comes from like the foundation and the relationship building we've been doing for the last 10 years. That's probably one of the easiest parts of our jobs right now, is to like communicate with the agencies, because we've done a lot of work with them. I think what's been great since Governor Hochul came in, and with Gabe and Tanya coming in, is now we have that sort of executive level sponsor. We can sort of tie up some of the stories of a lot of the work that's being done, and then that can be shared at a broader level, or we can make deeper connections of like these few things that here's like 3 examples from different agencies of things we're doing to improve the experience that we can sort of tie up as like, this is a larger commitment that the state's making. And that's a really powerful story to tell. So I think,
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's been a really like fresh perspective since they came on board.
And I would just say, in addition to the kind of the data and the metrics and the kind of more quantified business cases, sometimes it helps to just have people like kind of feel the experience themselves. And so actually earlier on, as we were planning the agenda, Jessica actually ran an actual usability, like she did user research with one of our executive sponsors to have them just go through the DMV website and try to, and the tax website, and try to fill out some, do some transactions. And I think, not to disparage those agencies, but of course it's a complex set of questions you have to answer, and sometimes the flow works on some devices, not other devices. And so even just having people feel, why are we doing this work makes a big impact as well.
All right, so heading over to some more questions from the chat. Alex has a question here. Do you think that UX should also consider logistics and hard considerations in the design process? Many constituents might have a really good experience on their front end, would have a really bad experiences when they actually get to the event.
Yeah, definitely the whole journey. We have to start thinking more broadly, and wherever that leads, whether it's to an event or service, post-service, that's really that is the experience. It's not a website. Why do people come to our websites in government? They come so that they can leave and get their service. So wherever the journey takes us.
I think that's why our teams collaborate so much, because together we kind of cover the journey. And so we may have one part of that whole journey or that product, and sort of then it's passing the baton for them, for Luke and team to take another part of it. And sometimes you can't always fix the whole thing, but if there are key moments and defining those key moments, we try to work together on that.
All right, Risa has a question. What does it mean to treat government sites as projects, not products, as Luke said?
We are wrangling with this one right now. I think it, for the most part, comes down to funding. In government, we fund projects, and then the operational support is just enough to keep the lights on, not to incrementally improve the product. So, yeah, I mean, it comes down to resourcing, I think, and caring for the things that we've built already.
And a question
I
here from,
think that's an area, I echo everything Luke said, and I'm a really firm believer in the importance of treating a lot of these services as products. As someone who worked as a product manager in the tech industry, I subscribe to that. But it is a very different way of thinking, and I think Luke's right. I mean, this is the nature of how we typically fund these types of initiatives in government, and there's a reason that we do it that way. But I do think shifting to a model in which we're always improving and always making incremental improvements to the experience requires having people who are full-time staff to these types of services. And that's something that we are transitioning to at ITS. But it's a culturally different thing, and it helps to have, that's an area where I think executive sponsorship and amplifying a message of the importance of that work is really helpful for someone in the governor's office to do.
And a question here from Raphael. With the great diversity of New York State, have you been able to do UI, UX with racial, ethnic, and language groups? How do Spanish speakers use the online resources?
It's been a major push for language access in New York State. And, we're using a combination of human and machine translation there. We've yet to move into it from a UX perspective. I would love to, move into that, especially in the Spanish-speaking, community, and have designers that speak the different languages. And even from an accessibility perspective, have people that are on staff that know what it's like to have to navigate an alternative manner. I think that should be on all of our roadmaps. That's a great question.
I think we have time for one more question. And so, Amira, thank you for asking. How do you find the balance between leveraging and leaning into best practices from technology companies versus abiding by the policy and legislation of government?
That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Great question. Luke or Jessica, do you guys have thoughts?
I would say let's figure out if it's an innovation or a fad. Remember flat design? Well, our site, when we relaunched a lot of our sites in 2014, we used a lot of flat design, and when it caused usability issues. So I think being very keen on what is actual improvement and what is fad and shiny. We definitely want to be leveraging things. Another thing too is we have to be very careful. Some of our systems live for 15 and 20 years. And if we're just always jumping to the shiny new front end framework and things like that needs upgrades all the time, we can really dig ourselves into a technical hole. So thinking about operational sustainability, making sure that we're not chasing fads, but leveraging the design patterns that really work and that people are used to. I think finding that balance and really being thoughtful is the key.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for joining us, and I hope everyone on today's webinar can join me in giving them a round of applause and a lot of thank yous for spending time and sharing your stories with us today. A reminder that we are going to summarize today's event with key takeaways on digitalservicenetwork.org. And then that will also include a video for this event if you would like to share it with your colleagues who couldn't make it today. Really pleased to see such a great discussion in the chat. Special shout out for Dave Cameron, who emphasized that FormFest is coming up, which really resonates with the work that has been done in New York State. It's on December 4th. It's an online celebration of government forms. And so if you like today, you will like FormFest on December 4th. We hope to see you at a future DSN event, so please be on the lookout for more information about upcoming DSN virtual events. And again, if you haven't already, please take a minute to join the Digital Service Network. We continue to grow, and we'd love to continue to share great stories about digital innovation to inspire your government work. And then lastly, we would love your feedback on how this event went. So please take a quick event survey. We'll drop that into the chat. But with that, I want to just say a huge thank you again to Gabe, Luke, and Jessica. You're doing inspiring, important work, and we're so glad that you could share that with us today. So with that, we will close today's event, and thanks again for coming, everyone.